I'm of mixed background. What am I supposed to mark on an application? Am I supposed to mark multiple boxes? And plus, if you are painting people as an oppressor, if you're white,
that's
and
a
then
terrible
saying
thing to
that
tell
you're
someone to do.
oppressed,
well, it's the truth because you believe in affirmative action. So I said mark black. If you're a mixed student, I'm in an interracial relationship, so I can speak to this. I have a son that's half white and a son that's half black and a daughter that's half white and half black. Okay. They're going to mark black because I know that there are people like you at the universities who will say, well, because this person is black, I'm just going to let them in.
No, they're going to mark black because they're black.
Well, they're half black and half white. They're both, right? So it is true. You overlook
So
you overlook interracial students.
But
so what do you mean? Why are you saying they're going to mark black because they're black?
Socialized in our society.
So the answer is if you can't, you can mark both. Can you mark both? I don't know if you can. Yes. What are you going to look at that applicant as a little bit less because they're half white? How do you guys figure that out?
How they look at it is, again, holistically across a number of different factors.
I love me a buzzword. Holistically and racial consciousness.
Oh, yeah? Reverse discrimination. There's a buzzword.
It's not reverse discrimination. It's just discrimination. It's just racism if you're judging people on the basis of their skin color. I don't know why this is so difficult. You have to go through an extraordinary amount of school. You almost have to have a PhD to not be able to see this.
All right, guys. So I stumbled across this very fascinating episode of Dr. Phil talking about college admissions and discrimination. And we all know what we're talking about here when we're talking about discrimination in college admissions. We're not talking about discrimination against so-called people of color. Well, I guess if you're Asian, that's what we're talking about, right? But I don't know why Asians are considered so-called people of color when white people are not, right? When, again, a lot of times we're talking about Asians, we're talking about like Chinese people, Japanese people, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day, right? But you know what we're talking about here. We're talking about discrimination against whites and Asians in college admissions. And Candace Owens and some other conservatives are on this show, and they're debating this woke academic about some of these woke colleges and their admissions process that, again, it's just textbook racism. It's textbook discrimination. And I want to react to it and also pull on some of my experience at UNC Chapel Hill when we're talking about the question of race-based admissions, particularly when it comes to black male students, right? Because that's a big thing. That's a big conversation that happens at UNC Chapel Hill, the school that I went to, the school that I graduated from. So I think that, again, I can kind of add something to this discussion here. So I want to react to it. I think that this is fascinating. So without further ado, let's get into it.
I want to welcome conservative author and TV host Danielle D'Souza and distinguished professor of education at San Diego State University, Dr. Luke Wood. So welcome to both of you. Now, let me start with you. Is it possible for white people to be discriminated against because they are the majority and discrimination involves power? Is it possible?
First and foremost, let me say, what a silly question. Again, I know why Dr. Phil is asking it this way, okay, because this is the way that the wokes frame it, okay? Discrimination and racism is a power structure, right? It has nothing to do with, actually, hating another group of people because of their race. That's only possible if you're white because whites are in power. Whites are all powerful. They're basically God. Therefore, they're the only people that are capable of racism/discrimination. Incredible stuff.
Absolutely. It is unequivocally possible. It happens all the time. This actually happens not only in specific instances, but this happens in a systemic way on our most elite college campuses. And I would also say that this is happening not just in education, but in the workplace.
Well, is it justified, though? Because if there has been disparity and if there has been discrimination, if there have been minorities that have been excluded for years and years and years and years, is this the way to start to bring some balance and diversity back to those universities and workplaces?
Absolutely not. Affirmative action has been going on for over 50 years, so this has been happening for a long time. And even now, we've actually seen that it's gotten worse in the sense that race relations are so poisonous, and many people on college campuses actually feel like because of all of this that's happening, they feel like they're being pitted against each other.
Doctor, what do you think?
Well, I think I would very respectfully disagree. I certainly don't think that white people are disadvantaged in college admissions. In fact, I would say it is the exact opposite, which is why there are policies and practices in place now to try to alleviate the historical burden. It's like, if you ever played Monopoly before, right? Imagine like you have a person who's playing Monopoly and they get to go around multiple times, right? And then like halfway through the game, someone gets to enter into the game. And then because they get a turn, right, then the accusation is, well, somehow that game is unfair.
So the problem with what this guy is saying is that he's assuming that just because of your skin color, you have some inherent advantage in life. Okay, let's say, for example, if you are poor and white, you're automatically ahead of the game. You're more ahead of the game than somebody who may be black and middle class, or black and upper middle class, or even black and, wealthy or whatever, simply because of skin color. Now, what he says does apply from a socio-economic perspective when you're talking about a disparity between household incomes, okay, and access to resources, which is more based off, again, income, okay, rather than race. But again, you can't just assume because you're white that you have some advantages in life, or that, your life has been easier, or that you have more resources just because of your skin color. Because again, that to me would seem that, hey, well, you're going to justify making it harder for white people who don't come from wealthy backgrounds, or that don't have a lot of resources, or that come from poverty-stricken neighborhoods. You're going to make it harder for them because you think that they have some type of inherent advantage because of their skin color, which is just, in my opinion, racist, right? It's racist.
The kind of accusation, what we would say is reverse racism, we really just view it as what we call race sliding. Race sliding is what happens when gaslighting is racial. And essentially, if you look historically, colleges and universities have prioritized admissions for students who are white. Why is that? When you admit a student, it's oftentimes based upon your grades, high school grades, and your test scores, ACT and SAT, which are being phased out due to COVID-19. But if you think about it, the SAT and ACT have historically measured access to resources, the neighborhood that you grow up in. It is not a measure of a student's drive, a student's motivation. It is really a measure of their access. And ultimately, we know that when things measure access, they really measure white privilege.
No, what they actually really measure is the type of household that they come from, okay? Because he is right in a certain sense that income, aka resources, definitely correlates with SAT scores. But again, a lot of that does come from family structure. Okay, are you coming from a two-parent household, right? How much do the parents value education? How much time are they spending reading to kids at a young age? Okay, again, a lot of that stuff is really just foundational in regards to the household, what the parents are doing in the household to help the child learn. Okay. That's not white privilege, right? That's just something that we should be promoting in society. That's how you would fix it, is more traditional family values and nuclear family structure. But again, these people don't really believe in that, right? They don't believe in that, okay? They think that that's a form of white privilege. I mean, this is basically what he's saying. These things are white privilege. Because, I mean, partly they believe that black people are too dumb. Again, that's the offense here. Right? Oh, we shouldn't use SAT scores or any type of objective measure of a student's academics performance because blacks just can't perform as well, right? Again, they're assuming black people are dumb instead of saying, black people can perform just as well if they are in an environment that's stable and that promotes that type of academic success, which is what, again, they really should be trying to solve that problem instead of discriminating, which, by the way, he admits to when he talks about race sliding, that they discriminate against whites in admissions. This is what he's saying. But I don't think that's discrimination. It's because they have more of an advantage, right? So therefore, we're trying to take away that advantage. And I just don't buy into his argument that just because you're white, by definition, that means that you have more of an advantage no matter where you come from. I tend to believe that a black person who comes from a well-off family is going to have more of an advantage than a white person from a poverty-stricken family or area.
Candace, are we compromising standards if we do that because we haven't fixed the problem down the line?
That's correct. It is the policies are harmful also to the people that they purport to help. And we have all of the evidence there to look at. When you artificially place a Black American into a school in which they do not belong based on their knowledge, doesn't mean that they go on to get A's. In fact, there was a Black adjunct professor, you guys have definitely heard of him, Dr. Thomas Sowell, who was teaching at Cornell University, and he found that the majority of the Black American students that were there were on academic probation. Now, these students were some of the smartest in the nation, but because they were artificially placed amongst their peers at Cornell University, they were failing on academic probation. these policies have never helped Black Americans. It's just basically policies that are put in place to make people feel good, right? I feel like I'm doing something when in fact I'm actually creating harm. You either know the answers or you don't.
When you say,
Yeah, so just to kind of back up what Candace is saying here, this is a big debate at UNC when I was there about the black male graduation rate, okay, which was substantially lower, significantly lower than that of the general population, okay? And there was a debate about it, like, is UNC doing enough to support black male students? And I'm thinking to myself, well, what can a university do more to support black male students to make them get better grades, right? Is the university supposed to study for them? Is it supposed to make them go to class, right? Is it supposed to make them do the things that, you know, all students are supposed to do in order to get good grades? Again, being a black male student at the university, I graduated in 4 years, right? So I graduated on time. I think that personally for me, my skin color had nothing to do with my grades, more so than the effort that I was putting in. Okay, I put in very little effort and still got a 3.0. And you know, at the time, you know, I didn't like it, and I didn't decide to do something about it until like my junior year, where I was like, you know what, I'm actually gonna put in effort. And when I actually put in effort, lo and behold, you know, I was able to actually, you know, consistently get over a 3.5, right, in a semester. Okay, it had nothing to do, again, with my skin color holding me back or anything like that. What was holding me back is just simply my drive and my effort in what I was putting into it. But again, they framed this problem as it's some type of systemic issue where it's the university's fault. No, it's society's fault that black men are failing. When, I mean, they're partly right in the sense that when you let these people into a university when they're not ready, I don't think it helps. I think it actually hurts because they get lower grades. Even though the degree that they get from the school, it looks good, right? It looks great for a black male to have a degree from a Yale or Cornell or, you know, a Harvard or UNC Chapel Hill or University of Virginia, whatever. Looks great. But if your GPA is below 3.0, realistically, your job prospects are probably not going to be any better than if you had gotten, I don't know, a 3.5 at a lesser school, right? Where, who knows, maybe, you know, you're more prepared for, you know, those schools than you are to go to a more academically rigorous school. Again, I'm just saying, people should be admitted based off their academic track record in school that shows that, hey, they're ready to be accepted at this university and to take these level of courses. Because otherwise, if they're not, then they're going to end up dropping out. They're going to end up graduating late. That means they're going to end up accumulating more debt. Okay, they're not going to get as good as jobs, right? They might drop out, right? They may quit college altogether, may not go to school at all, may not graduate at all. Again, what do you accomplish? The black male students or the black students that go to these universities like a UNC Chapel Hill or whatever, and they succeed and they're very successful, well, most likely they were probably very successful in high school. They didn't need a booster seat, right, to get into the university. They didn't need affirmative action. They were going to get in regardless. And again, this problem right here is not just existent at a school like UNC. It happens all over the country where you have black male students that are just not performing as well academically. And again, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing because, again, it just shows that, okay, well, you're just not ready to be here. Or maybe you shouldn't be here. Which is, again, why you shouldn't be letting students into these schools that just aren't ready. It's an embarrassment. You should be taking the best of the best regardless of skin color and race.
hey, we have black students at a particular school who aren't performing at that school as well, the immediate assumption that you're making is, well, maybe it's because they're not smart enough, they're not good enough, or they don't belong here. Whereas it could be about the experience that they're having at that institution. Professors who believe that they're not intelligent enough, that they don't have the capability to do the work, that they see them as criminals, deviants, dangerous, up to no good.
Oh, man. So it's the professor's fault, which, I mean, some of these professors are woke, but again, I mean, that's the funny part about this. Most of academia is woke, but he's trying to say that these professors see them as criminals and yada, 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 but they're all woke, right? So if anything, they're probably given more leniency because they're black. And some of these students are still failing anyways, right? But again, they shouldn't have been there in the first place. That is what the reality is. And it hurts them to be at an institution that they just shouldn't be at. That is what's actually hurting them, letting them into the university when they shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Or they talk about them with the they statements. They're lazy. They don't care. They don't really belong here. They're only here for the financial aid.
I'm giving you actual facts.
No,
right?
I'm giving you actual facts based upon extensive
say, well, maybe they
research
just
that's
don't
been
feel
done.
good. But that's not the case. I mean, I went to university. I did not feel good, right? I didn't pull the best grades in high school, probably got into a better university than I should have gotten into based on my performance in high school. It wasn't because of my feelings. It's because I wasn't focused on it. And that, we're talking about a cultural problem, what's going on back at home, as was in my circumstance. And none of that is because of institutionalized policy. It almost seems like you guys refuse to accept that, Black students aren't performing well. You feel like you have to have this burden of responsibility when, in fact, if you actually wanted to help, you would look at the facts, re-examine the fact that it's not helping anybody, it's not helping Black Americans to artificially place them into universities, and you'd make effective change.
But you're making the assumption that Black students are academically inferior, and they're not.
No,
They're
you
some of
are
our most
actually.
brilliant
That's
students that we
the
have.
basic. No. That you are making the assumption that they are inferior.
You
It
just
is
said
why
that they
you
don't
want
belong there.
policies. I'm talking about the students that are based on the policies that you are defending right now, saying that we should have these policies that let them into these universities, not based on their skill set, but based on the color of their skin. So you are assuming that they are inferior.
Comedian
Yeah, I mean, again, she's right. I mean, when you say, hey, look, we don't need to go off grades, right? We don't need to go off SAT. We don't need to go off, test scores, any objective measure of academic performance. You're assuming that these kids are not as smart, right? They're just not as capable. They can't do as well on these tests. Therefore, you have to lower your standards, which in my opinion, again, is bigotry. There are Black kids that can perform and that are smart enough to perform just as well as everybody else. Those are the students you should be letting in, right? But the students that can't, no, you shouldn't let them in. You're not helping them by letting them into a university they don't belong to, and then they end up dropping out when you could have gave that spot to somebody who is actually worthy of being there and who is going to perform well. Again, that's the problem here.
Tyler Fischer claims he has been turned down by 3 agencies because they said they just weren't looking for white men to book at this time. Tyler, thanks for being here.
Thank you. I do identify as a Latino female now, so just adjust my pronouns. Yeah. So I've been in the entertainment business for 17 years, and I think what we're not talking about is children right now. Thank God I had about 5 years where this was not happening, where race was not pounded over your head. This is destroying people's lives.
Yeah.
The manager that told me, I can't work with you because you're white, he was a pawn, And so it's so sad because I feel so bad for kids who won't have that chance. They're going to go, oh, I'm told I'm white, so I'm not going to go for it. What would you say to a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, no matter what their race is? Should you, what would you actually tell them? Should you give your job up? And let me ask you directly, do you think it was justified for me to be told, we can't represent you, you don't have the chance to now compete for jobs because you're white? Yes or no? Was that okay or was that not okay?
I think that what is described
Yes
by
or no?
you.
Don't give me your little
let me
bubble
finish.
wrap.
What
Yes
is
or
described
no?
by you, someone telling you that you can't get that job because you're white, does not sound right to me.
I did a show the other day, and they said, are you doing the next show? And I said, yeah. The guy said, I didn't know you were gay. He said, this is a gays-only show. And so that's why Hollywood sucks right now, by the way, because they're not hiring based on talent. What do we do about heart surgeons, airplane pilots? How far do we want to go with this?
They're going to go as far as they want to take it, right? This is what they're going to do. They're going to replace the straight white male pilots with women, okay? So-called women of color, okay? They're going to replace a lot of the essential professions in this country, again, like surgeons, doctors. I mean, they're already trying to get rid of the MCAT, right? They're trying to get rid of MCAT because apparently Black students aren't smart enough to score high on the MCAT to compete with everybody else. Again, this is the type of stuff, man. Again, it's hard bigotry. And this type of discrimination is unacceptable. Again, these people are not liberal anymore, right? They are just radical progressives, okay? And these radical progressives believe in full-blown discrimination, okay? They believe in like Jim Crow discrimination, and they're totally fine with it. And it's just, in my mind, it's sad that this is where we're at in a society where you have people that are having this experience where they're just explicitly being told that, hey, you can't get this job because you're white. Again, just as much anger would be towards somebody telling somebody you can't get this job because you're black. Those two things deserve equal amount of anger, okay, and pushback, because that is not what the point was when we decided that, hey, we're going to give equal rights to everybody. The point was not to get to a point where we're like, nah, we need to discriminate against whites, right? That's not what the goal was. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black conservative perspective. Peace.